Hello, good evening, everyone. I hope that you're doing well. This is just a quick session on session 2, and just going over and understanding sort of a little bit about where we left off last week, which was about understanding corporate citizenship and the ethical foundations of it. So the ethical, legal, and moral foundations of corporate citizenship. So we'll touch on the difference between morality, we'll look at ethics, we'll look at the legal framework, which is governed by, which governs corporate social responsibility. And then we'll also look at things like how ethics connects to financial performance. And we'll touch on two different sort of ideologies and two different sort of ways of looking at ethics. So why does corporate citizenship matter? Ethical conduct is no longer optional. It is central to business legitimacy and long-term value. As I said to you last week, that is no longer just good enough to do good business, but it's about also demonstrating that you have, as a partner, you as a corporate citizen, you can have an impact, a positive impact on the environment, a positive impact on society as a whole, and you can be trusted as a responsible corporate citizen. And this is as a company, as an organization. As I mentioned last week, that organizations actually have quite a big role to play in society. And there's that triad between society, corporations, and the government. And that relationship, that almost like that social pact that we form, that agreement that we form between society and between corporations and between government. And depending on the system, the capitalist system or the free market system that you operate in, government plays a big role in terms of legislation, in terms of setting guardrails, in terms of putting together the legal framework in which to operate. If you're operating in a more laissez-faire, like the US and some other countries where the government they talk about small government, where the government steps back and it sort of says the free market will determine what is right and how businesses should operate. And we leave it over to the businesses to decide what they need to do that is right and what is wrong. Whereas in Europe and in other countries, you'll find in other regions, you'll find that there is a lot more, they talk about big government, and government plays a lot more of an active role in setting that sort of legislative framework and that legal framework. And they really monitor organizations very closely in order to ensure that they're doing the right thing. So the question is, how do you determine what is the right thing? How do you know what is the right thing? Who decides what is the right thing? Does government, does a whole bunch of bureaucrats decide that these are the things that are right for society? Does society decide? Or the representatives of that society, which is represented by the bureaucrats, which is represented by government? Or do you leave it up to organizations to decide what is the right thing? And there's pros and cons for both of them. There is good arguments for more laissez-faire, more of a small government, more of organizations determining and driving and saying, and it's a more of a, what they call a more of an open market, free market system, that if you're not going to do the right thing, then the market will punish you. Customers will no longer buy your product. They will no longer buy your services because you will go down. Whereas good companies, and I put that in big inverted companies, will always rise to the top because they've got good products, they've got good services. And just like in society is apologies, society will always gravitate towards those good products. And again, good decides who decides what is good. And then where does that leave society as a whole, as a broader whole consumers? Where does that leave us? What power do we have? We've got a power of choice. We can decide which products to buy. We can decide which brands to buy as well. So tonight, really, we'll talk about three things. One is morality, ethics, and we'll talk about the law and how those three things interact. And then we'll touch on briefly on why and where sort of King 4 sits and how they approach it. So what is morality? This is the side quest which I spoke to you about last week. This morality is, you can go into a deep philosophical discussion about what is the difference between right and wrong. Morality refers to a deeply set of values that inform our sense of right. So what is morality? Morality refers to that deeply held values that inform our sense of right and wrong. It's based on culture, it's based on upbringing, it's based on our belief system, it's based on our our religion, it's based on what we and some philosophers would even go so far as to say that all of us are born with the innate inside of us a sense of what is right and what is wrong. Other philosophers would tend to say that no, it is nurtures. We get taught through societal norms, we get taught through our family and our upbringing and our culture and religion. We get taught what is right and what is wrong. Whichever way you look at it, morality is a deeply personal thing, and it can differ from person to person. Some people might find that certain actions are completely moral and completely justified, completely right, whereas others, through the upbringing, through the religious point of view, or through the community, they will see that it is completely wrong. A good example would be underage marriage, where in certain societies, in certain communities, marrying a young girl can be accepted and completely, it is completely something normal. Whereas in other societies, you might look at it and go, that is deeply immoral, it is deeply wrong, and how could one possibly do that? So morality, in some philosophers would say it is something that is born within us. Some philosophers come from a point of view that it is something that we learn. So they talk about a clean slate. Every child is born and they don't know the difference between right and wrong, and they get taught it through society, through religious frameworks, and through community. So that is morality. It is something that is deeply personal. What is ethics then? Ethics is, think of ethics as the code of conduct. Ethics is a branch of philosophy. It talks about these decision frameworks that we have. It is applied in professional and corporate context. It's the code of conduct. It's a way that these are the right set of actions. This is the right way of behaving within this organization or within this community or within this society or this organization. That is how ethics is best explained. It is not morality, which is deeply personal. Ethics is more so, how does the community or the collective express that morality through their actions, through their behavior. It is a set of guidelines, it's a set of rules which are set down in order to guide our behavior. Now, you might think of, okay, so what is the law then? If we have morality, which is deeply personal, and then ethics, which is a set of guidelines, then what is the law then? The law is the minimum that you need to do in order not to be punished. It is a legal framework, which means that if the law is the minimum, ethics is on top of the minimum, and morality sits on top of ethics. So ethics is what is right, while legal is nothing to do with morality. It is simply to do with, these are the minimum things that you need to do in terms of compliance, in terms of the law, in terms of what is expected of you, in order to not to get punished. So the law is about avoiding punishment. Ethics is about doing the right thing. Morality is the engine, it's the thing that's inside of you that drives you to do the right thing. Which means that a person that have morals which might be very different, or they interpret it very different, or they lack that sense of right and wrong, if legislation or legality or the law is about doing the minimum not to get punished, ethics is about doing the right thing, then morality is about the thing that sits within you, that drives you into ethical behavior, and ethical behavior generally is on the right side of the law. If you struggle with, or if you're challenged by your morals, then you tend to engage in unethical behavior. And some of that unethical behavior can be completely deemed as legal, but some of them might not be lawful. So a good thing, a good way of looking at it is tax avoidance and tax compliance versus trying to not pay tax at all. So what is the moral sort of driver? The moral driver is that we as a society, everyone needs to do the right thing. Everyone needs to contribute towards society for society to function. And in order to do that, I pay my tax. I then give that tax over to a bunch of people that I voted for to represent me in order to do and decide on what to do with that tax to the benefit of everyone. So that's my morality. That is what drives me to behave in the ethical way. And the ethical way is that each month, each year, when I submit my taxes, there's certain things. No one is there standing behind me to tell me that I need to declare everything. I do it because I'm morally driven to do it. Make sure that I declare everything, that I cross my T's, I dot my I's. And then I will pay my taxes and I will see that benefit across society. Whereas if morally you're looking at it and going, you know what, I don't really believe in this government. I never voted for them. I don't believe in paying taxes. I believe that this money is mine, and I will try to, everything that I do is I will engage in unethical behavior, because it's difficult for everybody to see what I do. And then by the time that I have to declare my income, I will then find ways of minimizing it in order to minimize the amount of tax that I pay. And then when I look at it afterwards, I go, yes, and I go brag to my friends and my family saying, you know what, I managed to screw, pardon my language, I managed to take SARS for a ride because I managed to not pay this tax, I managed to not pay that tax. If you found out, now that unethical behavior is completely legal. Completely legal. However, if you step over the line and you engage in unethical behavior that is illegal, you will get locked up. But there's so much unethical behavior, unethical actions that are deemed to be legal. Another good example is things like I spoke about last week. I spoke about the labeling and how different companies, the new labeling legislation that came in. It's one of my favorite examples. So before the new labeling legislation came in, every company could put on their label whatever. They could literally say, this is strawberries that come from the best places in the world, blah, blah. They could, as long as there's some grain, as long as inside of that container, there's like a 0.00001% strawberry in there, you can claim that there's strawberries in there because you're not lying. There is strawberry in there. You might not be able to see it, you might not be able to find it, but there is strawberry in this yogurt. New label legislation came in. Companies then had to declare that it's actually not strawberries. It's actually just strawberry flavorant that's in there. So there's actually no strawberries in there. There's this chemical in there that tastes like strawberries and smell like strawberries. And now you have strawberry flavored yogurt. And if you look at labels, it's my favorite part. It's my favorite thing to do. Look at what these labels keep on talking about, what these companies keep on talking about how healthy they are, about how good their product is. They'll say all kinds of things. They'll say, we give you energy. We've got so many amino acids in it. We've got so much protein in it. We've got so much of this in it. We've got so much of that in this. And then when you look at the actual contents and you think, but how much do you have in there? Find that it is actually very, very little in terms of what is there. So it's interesting. Do yourself a favor. It is very, very interesting. All right. So I'm trying to get. So what we have is we've got morality, we've got ethics, and we have what we talk about the law. So when we talk about good companies, they go beyond just compliance. They don't go to beyond what must we do as a minimum to stay out of trouble. They go, what can we do to deliver better products to our customer? What can we do to deliver great services to our customer? Ethical leadership builds on credibility, strengthens stakeholder relationships. There's different viewpoints in terms of ethics, and and this is important because these two different viewpoints tells you a little bit about the different approaches that companies approach in terms of corporate governance. So the first set of theories is what we call consequentialist theories, and then we've got non-consequentialist theories. So consequentialist theories are really that the ends justify the means. If I need to let go of 15 people when I relocate my factory, the end is that my new place, the factory will be more profitable, and I can employ and I can keep employed the other 500 that will still have work. So for those 15 people, it is a bad day for them. And you would look at this company as being this heartless company that's just making these decisions that are just not good for the employees and for their stakeholders. But then you also need to look at the 500 that gets to keep their job. The other side of that coin might be that they're moving to a different place in order to get better tax breaks, in order to get better working conditions, in order maybe reduced working conditions, and maybe increase their profit as well. So the end justifies the means. And that is what we call consequentialist theories. It really comes from utilitarianism. This idea, if you ever heard of the story about the trolley problem, in which in a trolley, there's a big train coming down the track, and the track splits into two, and behind you, and you get to choose which line gets chosen. In which maybe on the front side, maybe you've got your son, he's tied up to the track, but behind you there is 5 other people, and you're going to have to choose between your son and 5 strangers, and that is 1 life versus 5 lives. And utilitarianism would say that, listen, you would always choose the 1 because the 5 is more important than the 1. And the end justifies the means. But it's a difficult problem to solve. That's why they call it the trolley problem. It's quite a philosophical sort of discussion point. Part of consequentialist theories are things like egoism, outcomes of the key concern, often used in what we call cost-benefit analysis. When companies they say, well, let's do a cost-benefit analysis. Let's understand how much it's going to cost us and the benefit that we're going to derive from it. The question is, who decides which life is more important? That person that's lying on the track, your son, might one day discover the cure to cancer and heal millions of people. The 3 people behind you, 2 of them might be a pedophile and 1 might become a murderer. You don't know that. And that's the challenge with consequentialist theories, and the end justifies the means, that who decides on what is the greatest good? Who decides on which track to take? Who decides? How do you know? You can't look into the future. Just because you close down the factory here and you let 15 people go, doesn't mean that when you're going to operate in a different site, the 500 that gets to keep their jobs, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to earn more money or have better working conditions. And that's the biggest challenge with that. On the other side of the coin, what we have, what we call non-consequentialist theories. Non-consequentialist theories says that the means is always the means. The means is always the means. Meaning that doesn't matter what the end is, and it was Immanuel Kant is a sort of a Renaissance philosopher, a French philosopher. He really talks about this. There's a set of universal duties that applies to everyone. Ethics of rights and justice. It's about respecting other people's rights. There are just things that are right, and there are things that are wrong. Some acts are always wrong. Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter in which consequence or which circumstance it is. Focus on consistency and integrity. The challenge with non-consequentialist theories, unfortunately, is that who decides that these rules are so rigid that what you do. A good scenario is this. You've got a code of conduct for your company, and the code of conduct is clear that it's the use of company vehicles. And you have a driver. The driver's wife is highly pregnant. She's on the last few days. And while he's doing his route, he gets a call from her and says, I need to go to the doctor right now because I might lose the baby. And he takes his company vehicle and he drives home and he takes it to the doctor, and both of them survive. However, the rules are the rules. The code of conduct is absolutely clear. You're not allowed to use your company vehicle for any private use whatsoever. And by all rights, that driver should be fired, that driver should be let go, because the rules are the rules. The question is, what about the circumstances that surrounded that driver's decision? What about your own humanity that has to make this decision? Because if you follow the letter of the law, if you follow the letter of the policy, then that person should be let go. That person should be asked to leave. But the circumstances are very different. But the tension, though, is if that person gets a second chance due to external factors and things, what happens to the other person? Now it's not the other driver. Now it's not his wife that's delivering. Now his grandmother that needs to go to the hospital to pick up a tablet. Now it is another particular personal emergency that needs to be attended to. What are you going to do now? And the reason why we have this framework, this non-consequentialist framework, is that it takes circumstantial evidence out of the equation. It says there's rules, the rules are the rules. And no matter the end, this is what it is. There's also what we talk about, some contemporary theories within the same vein, which is things like virtue ethics, feminist ethics, discord ethics, postmodern ethics, and so forth. You guys can take a read through that. Doing good is about doing well. There's this view that if as a company you do good, you are seen to be a good brand. Yes, people gravitate towards you. People will buy more of your product, they'll buy more of your service because they perceive you, they see you as being a good brand, a good company. Company that looks after the environment, a company that does everything for its workers and stakeholders, a company that helps to develop and grow society as a whole. You don't take excessive profits, you share some of your value with everyone else. And that is one way of looking at it, is that a company like that will then increase in market share and therefore increase in sales and then increase in profitability. However, there's a tension there. Just because you're doing good doesn't mean that you will make more money. And at the end of the day, there's the tension between stakeholders and shareholders. Stakeholders are the broader stakeholders, employees, government, society as a whole. and shareholders and workers. But on the other side, you've got shareholders, is the people that own the company, and they have a vested interest to ensure that they've got a vested interest to ensure that the company does well in order for them to, for you to deliver more profit to them. Right. So let's look at the legislation. Let's look at ethics and the legislation and corporate citizenship that we have. We've got a Companies Act that sort of legislates governance and accountability. We've got NEMA and environmental responsibility. We've got the B-BBEE, which is about transformation equity. We've got Organizations Health and Safety Act, and then Occupational Health and Safety Act, which looks after employee protections. And then we've got King 4, which is an ethical framework for companies to follow, to look at and guide their efforts in terms of sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, once again, in a broader sense, the 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. So doing the right thing is good for business, especially in the long run. Strong ethics equals stakeholder confidence. Scandals destroy the market value, and ultimately ethics drive innovation and resilience. For this week, I've included a wonderful case study, which is Enron, which is, take your time to have a listen to that YouTube video. It is very good, very enlightening, but also gives you insight into, if there's very little guardrails, if there's very little legislation that guides behavior, legal minimums, if those legal minimums are also thrown out and companies are completely left to manage themselves, to legislate themselves, to self-report, you can see the outcome of that. And it is the biggest scandal in corporate history around the world. So in closing, thank you very much for taking the time to have a look at this recording, and we will see each other next time.